So you live in a dream, but why does it feel like you're drowning? You wake up and you don't want to get out of bed. Practice feels like a chore. The game that you used to love doesn't bring you joy anymore. And everyone around you thinks that you got it all, but you can't tell them how empty you feel inside. Maybe it's not burnout. Maybe it's not just being tired. Maybe it's depression. And just because life looks good on paper doesn't mean that you're okay. Today, I'm back again with Dr. Hillary, a sports psychologist that works with athletes from pro all the way over to youth. She talks about depression with athletes, what it is, why players get it, and even when they're winning and when they're feeling successful, how it shows up when no one's watching, and what you can actually do about it. Talk about how the people around you, uh, sometimes the one who are telling you to be grateful and toughen up are the ones making it harder for you to ask for help. She shares how to manage it and what people around you can actually do to help you rather than hurt you. So if you ever felt like you're disappearing while everyone thinks that you're fine, this conversation is for you. So in our last interview, we discussed anxiety, and you did a great breakdown, just understanding what it is, what happens to us, what's the deeper root, deeper understanding of it. And now we're going into depression. But before we get deep into it, there seems to be some overlap and some similarities, even some misunderstandings about anxiety versus depression. So before we dig into depression, can you help lay down the groundwork of the overlap that happens between those two?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of crossover in the way that it hits in our brain activity, right? And that frontal process of how we regulate emotions. The neural pathways are very similar. And so individuals who have anxiety may then lead to or have symptoms of depression as well, right? And so we kind of have this
Mm.
crossover and duality of symptoms and experiences that we have. And so sometimes it's hard to differentiate, am I feeling anxious and it's anxiety, or am I having some deep depression and kind of a combo of both mixtures. And so I think it's really important when you look at these symptoms and understanding like what's the root cause, what's the catalyst that's allowing me to feel a certain way, and the behaviors that I'm working through. And then you can have the best treatment and resources to help you kind of feel better and increase your energy and motivation and get you into a better emotional state.
Mhm. So I kind of heard like a breakdown of anxiety being you have too much going on, and depression feeling like not enough is going on, basically. So you kind of feel hopeless.
Yeah, in a sense, like anxiety really speeds us up. It increases our, thoughts and our feelings and our, heart rate and energy, and it just kind of amps you up. Where depression really does slow you down, and it kind of makes you feel lethargic and depletion of energy, and then it can lead into severe depression or chronic depression, where there is that loss of motivation, fatigue, helplessness to hopelessness, and we can see the severity of symptoms increase.
So how do you kind of clearly separate those two when it comes to like I feel this thing? How can I, like, without going to see you, kind of clearly separate what the two would be?
Yeah, the first step is just slowing down, right? Allowing your mind to take a breath, kind of pause, and then build self awareness, whether that's through body scans or you're looking at, like, okay, what is happening in my mind? What am I thinking about? And then what am I feeling? Where do I feel that energy and space? And what are the behaviors that I do? Am I starting to do too much and try to solve all the things and problem solve and fix and perseverate on things? Then we might know that that's that anxiety ramping up. Or getting you in a place where you're stuck and you paralyze. And then we see other symptoms like that depression coming into place where there's the low energy, the low motivation, a disconnection of what you once loved, and social isolation, and really feeling kind of more thoughts around identity crises, chronic stress, like what am I doing? What's the hope or purpose of this? And kind of some meaning making questions show up in your mind. That tends to make you feel a lot more incapable of doing things, right? And you won't do things. You'll stop doing the things that you once loved. And then we know that the depression has taken over. And so you have to look at just kind of, hey, where are my thoughts at? Where are my energy? What behaviors am I doing or not doing? Or what changed in my life that I need to kind of pause and reflect on, and then say, okay, let me get a hold of this and figure out what's the best solution to come out of it.
I think like the one of the biggest misunderstandings you can say with depression is most people see it as kind of what movies and TV has. It's just someone sitting in a dark room all day with, the windows closed and just laying on the bed and That's kind of what the imagery of depression is.
Mhm.
But it's a wider range of that. So how can you kind of explain the fuller scope of what depression is? Because that's a piece of it, but there's a lot more to it than just that.
Yeah, I think that that is a clear depiction of an image that can exist for sure. But what people often miss is the numbness and the depressive isolation that one experiences moving through the world in their daily basis, right? Where and even athletes, and this is the disconnect for our high performers. You can have high performers that are achieving really well, but then have this deep depression or depressive states outside of that, or depressive episodes, right? And where it's like, how can both things be true? And it really is the catalyst where sometimes people can just go through the motions, right? And they can be on autopilot. And what this looks like is, withdrawal, isolation, irritability. Like the irritability often shows up first when we see someone that's maybe going into a state of depression. And that's a miscue, right? Especially in children,
Mm.
that they start just getting angry and irritable, and it's like, hey, like what is causing this, what's going on? And it's they're trying to understand their own emotions, but that actually might be a deep level of sadness that is showing up, and they don't want to feel sad. And anger allows them to feel something that they can have action towards, an emotion that they can do something with, so they'd much rather be angry than they would be sad. And then that's why that people kind of get stuck in this, because they don't want to feel sadness, they don't want to feel the pain that is hard to explain, and the lack of energy and fatigue, and especially in athletes where you're so tired, but it doesn't match up with like the training loads, or it doesn't match up with what's happening. It's like, why am I so physically exhausted? And sometimes just having a conversation can be so hard for people. And that's where we tend to see people turn more inward, because it's a preservation for themselves, because they're trying to work through and manage their own emotions, and dealing with everything else is so hard. But to your point, rarely is it just locked up in a bed. Like, people wish that they could do that, but they have to go function and live life, right? So then it's how are they surviving in the world? And it really does feel like they're just kind of keeping their head above water, and trying to make meaning of what they're experiencing and feeling.
So what is it with the irritability? Like, why is that one of the first symptoms that you see that leads to depression?
Because people have enough awareness that they don't like to feel sad, right? And if we look at social construct around emotions, people will accept anger and irritability and annoyance and frustration way more than they'll experience the vulnerability of sadness. Sadness is a really hard emotion to deal with. Depression at its state is really complex, and people are socially awkward in terms of, how do I help understand someone's emotion and work through that, and could I carry the weight of someone else's emotion, and they get caught up in their own experience versus just understanding what someone's going through. And so I think that anger makes sense, right? Because you can put action towards it, and you can feel like someone's just being physical on the court, when the reality is that they're just utilizing their emotion to release this in a space that's allowing them to have physical contact in the movement that they're doing in their sport.
Mm, I think that makes sense. Okay, would it pair up with the I heard that when people are dealing with depression, it's like because there's so much energy to show up throughout the day that we said it's now when I get to the house, I have to isolate because I'm just so emotionally tired. And do you think that could kind of pair up with I'm just so emotionally tired with trying to just show up, and now you're asking me 10 questions and I don't want to even answer one of them. So that's draining more of my energy. Could that kind of be a overlap?
For sure, that also can be difficult, because it could also lead to social anxiety. And so it's like, what's the catalyst that's causing that? What's the root feeling you have, right? And the distinction between the two is, do you have a lot of perseverating thoughts and ideas and racing thoughts around how you showed up in a space, and being around people, and the anxious energy you feel in your chest with the idea that you have to go talk to 10 people in a day, and that overwhelmed you. Now you need to go restore your energy, versus um, I spent my day performing, because a depressed individual actually loses the interest and the connection and the passion for what they're doing. And they kind of are just going through the motions. And so they spent their day going through their motions. They spent their day doing blips of enjoyment potentially. And then they came back in, and then they have time to pause and experience their life in the state that they're in, and realize, like, this is really hard, whatever that might be. If it's tied to their performance, success, identity, if they're going through a loss, that now they have time to sit in silence in their own thoughts and feelings. And that can be a pretty scary space for people.
I've also heard a lot of people say when they are in this space, they don't want to be alone too much because they don't want to be in their thoughts and have to think about that. So the numbing of emotions and feelings gets paired with the not wanting to be alone.
Mhm.
What's kind of going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary space, right? Sometimes with anxiety or depression, but specifically with depression, we have these kind of intrusive thoughts that will show up in our brain, right? And ask questions that maybe someone doesn't want to face with, or have thoughts that they've never had, potential to self harm or not being and not living any longer, right? Like this idea of like, what would life be if I wasn't here? And some can be very passive thoughts where you're questioning like, would people miss me? Or what would happen if I just like uh, you're driving down the road and you're like, what would happen if I just turned into the median? Right. And maybe you never had that thought before, but it just popped up. And we call those more intrusive, passive ideations. They're not thoughts that you would prolong or commit an act of harm. But at some cases, the thoughts can actually be pretty real. And the act of, life is so hard and I can't find any way out. And that helplessness and hopelessness shows up. Um, Being alone can be pretty scary, right? And sometimes having distractions in your life and safety nets of people around you allows you to get out of your own way. This is why individuals will have maladaptive coping strategies because they're trying to feel a different emotion, right? We see people lean into certain type of addiction type patterns or do risky behaviors or substance use because that provides a different emotional state for them to be in and it takes away from the life and the thoughts that they were living in.
Mm. So what is going on with depression? Like, I know sometimes it's an event that happens, but it's a deeper part that can be genetics or it can be some like what's the chemical, the part that plays a role into it too?
Yeah, I mean, we have all these beautiful chemicals in our brain that make us feel good, the dopamine, the serotonin, the norepinephrine. And I think when we're looking at and we're losing the serotonin level, the emotion that makes you feel good, right? You have low doses of that in your brain. And the chemical imbalance is saying, hey, I don't have enough chemicals in my brain and body that are allowing me to produce emotions that make me feel good. I'm not getting that from um, outside life, right? So where you might used to get these hits through exercise or positive validation or other triggers that give you those hits and likes and feel good moments, it's not enough of a chemical reaction anymore. And so there is a chemical imbalance in your brain. And some of this can spark from, like you said, genetics, where there's neurological factors that cause us in our brain to just not produce enough chemicals. And then other things can happen in our life that trigger our brain to stop producing some of these emotions, these chemicals in our brain to produce the emotions we need to feel happy and joy and contentment. And that's caused through, like we said, most commonly if there is a loss or a death or breakups, or to the point in athletics when you look at injuries, right? These ACL tears, these Achilles tears that have been happening so frequently, we see all the time. That rehab recovery process is so long and it's so difficult. And the fact that one has lost their whole social structure, their normal routines, things that they once were doing, and now they're in this place of hardship and get stuck in the recovery phase. That while they may are making progress, it doesn't feel like progress is occurring, and they've lost the things that brought them joy. Like that can spark a depressive episode to occur as well.
Mm. So the chemical imbalance can be tied to what you were saying earlier of the numbness comes in. So like I enjoy working out and going to walks with my dog or seeing my loved one. And that, is a good thing. It provides me the emotion hit that I need. But then it gets to a point where it feels numbing and it's not enough. And that can be from the chemical imbalance caused or being caused. And that can start to trickle down to depression. That kind of right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a psychological response. There's a physiological component, like we're talking about, where we don't have the right chemicals that produce the positive emotions we have, and then by not having these, that's why we have a loss of appetite, so fatigued and tired, and draining energy and lack of motivation. But then we have those environmental cues that also exist in our world that can impact and cause the continuation of these symptoms and feelings, or be a result of why we're experiencing that way. And your brain can't have the ability to emotionally regulate in a way that it once was. So certain situations that maybe once were easy for people, like real chronic depression, like it's really hard to get out of bed. It's really hard to go take a shower. It's hard to do some daily living skills that one once had because we just don't have that emotional regulation and the ability to go do that. That's a hard task for people. And that's really hard for individuals who are not experiencing this or have never experienced a state of depression, to understand like, why can't someone go get up? They've been sleeping all day. Why don't they have the motivation? Why can't they shower? Why are they not eating? And part of that is the physiological component going on in their brain.
Mm. I've also heard how depression has lasting impacts, I guess you can say. Basically, it has like brain fog plays a role into it. So how does depression lead to some level of brain fog?
Yeah, you don't have the right dopamine reward systems. These neurotransmitters, these chemicals really help activate that emotional balance, and they help you, like we said, allow you to think more clearly and stay in that frontal, cortex of decision making and processing and clarity and creativity. But you have to be able to regulate and manage your emotions. And when we don't have that ability, we just have no energy and we're fatigued. And chronic fatigue can impact one's ability to process and think clearly as well. And sleep, if we aren't sleeping, are sleeping, you're not eating, all these factors that help someone live and have an emotional balance. People that are in high states of anxiety or depression are not doing those things, right? And so, one of the first tools I tell any individual is, hey, let's first help you sleep on a regular sleep schedule. When are you going to go to sleep at night and when are you going to wake up, right? And have that good sleep routine. And sleep eventually will help you start to balance out your emotional regulation. And then let's lead into other healthy factors of eating on a regular basis and what are the healthy foods that can fuel your brain power to give you the energy, and then set up other routines. But a sleep schedule is one of the first steps that we say, hey, let's get on this, that we're intentional about when we're sleeping and when we're waking up.
Mm. It sounds like it'll be hard to get on a sleep schedule though if I'm already struggling to go to sleep or I'm struggling like I'm already feeling so tired to sleep throughout the day. If like say it's a weekend, I'm sleeping in, I'm waking up at 10, 11 o'clock. You know what I mean? So how do you kind of balance? You need to have a sleep schedule, but because I am feeling anxious or depressed, that's gonna throw things off.
Yeah, all an individual wants to do is hide away in their safe space, which is their bed, right? Or their couch. Like
Mm.
that's a safe place where they can't have any of the factors impacting them or think about anything. And so this is the first behavioral change that is really hard, that we say, hey, like this is going to be very hard for you to do. And sometimes the win is literally get out of bed, take a shower, and then if you need to go back in, lay down, okay, but you got up and you showered, right? That is a win. We take small progressions to what we want to get to. We can't expect someone to just get right back to the way they once lived their life and fully happy and enjoy it. It's a small progression of getting back to balance.
Yeah. I don't know. This is like always a difficult thing because there's a balance of what is being done to the person and them trying to give grace of what's going on. And so I understand you're dealing with depression, you feel depressed, and this is what you feel. But you also have to like push the person or they have to push themselves to kind of get out of it. And I feel like that's like a really awkward phase to kind of be in because some people don't know how to push hard enough or they're pushing too hard. And that tends to more of the isolation. It can be a whole uh, dog chasing the tail things kind of going around in a circle. How do you manage like, okay, I know you feel this way, but like you said, let's just start to get the sleep schedule and let's begin by just taking a shower or just brushing your teeth. So how do you kind of manage that push and pull?
Yeah, I think society definitely highlights and validates people that push through things, especially in athletics. You're supposed to push through the hard, keep pushing, right? Like, are we feeling sore? Are we hurt? Are we actually injured, right? And like we praise people that push through things, right? Michael Jordan back in the day played the flu and like did this whole crazy thing. We praised him. Like I can't imagine how much he went through with that. Now it's like, really? Like was that the healthiest thing that you did for your teammates and your body? And that's a huge social shift, right? Because me saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't play when you have the flu, someone would say, well, maybe I don't have enough competitive drive or I don't understand athletics. And I'm like, well, I'm thinking about the overall well being of everybody, right? And it doesn't mean I'm soft. It means like, hey, I understand that person might have a lot of talent, but can we have other people that show up and let this person not injure themselves more because they're playing when their body's the weak immune state? And this is the controversial issues of sport because we're so used to praising individuals that push through and work through and model things that maybe are like the superpowers or the unnatural. But then we expect everyone to live that way and everyone to respond in urgency. And that's where I'm saying, hey, the first step is actually slowing down and allowing you to have the self awareness to slow down and figure out what's the first step to help me get back to feeling balanced. What's the first step to getting back? And I have my individuals that I work with name the emotion that they want to feel next. This is why depression is so complex because it's not just sadness. It doesn't just come up because you do have a chemical imbalance in your brain. That's the simplest answer to state. but it can come from burnout, injury, trauma, loss, um, chronic exhaustion and stress. And if we
Mm.
look at our athletes, like our athletes are in high pressure performance environments with chronic stress and fatigue and tons of loss and identity crises and injuries. And all of that is the environment that they live in on a daily basis. And we're expecting them to continue to not have the emotions that are vulnerable and real that humans experience. This is where I get into the work that I do, because that's just not real. It's not real. We have to understand that um, we have to modify the culture that they're in, the framework they're in, to be able to work through that successfully. And slowing down is the opposite of what anyone wants to do, but is the best thing for them. And then for them to name, what does good look like for them? What is the next thing that will make me feel better?
Mm. So like you were saying, there's the are you hurt or are you injured mentality in sports.
Mhm.
I think for depression, it's like, are you sad or are you depressed?
Correct. Yeah. And people can feel sad, and it does not mean that they're depressed. And people can have states of depression, but doesn't mean they're in chronic depression. And so this is where it gets really complex too, because you can experience after an immediate breakup. Let's imagine this is a pretty common thing that maybe individuals experience when they're dating someone and they get a breakup and they're like, "Oh man, I'm really sad, and my life is not the same, and I've lost some motivation, um, and I have no energy, and my appetite's changed." But that might last a week or two, and sometimes in and out, and you go back and forth because you miss the person that you once had. But you're not in a full state of chronic depression, right? Where individuals may experience this and stay this way for a long time. And so um, people can for sure be sad for many days in a row. And they might not be meaningful criteria of depression either, or be depressed. They're just really sad. Or the anxiety then leads them to feeling exhausted, and then leads them to feeling sad or anger, or irritable. And so this is why it's so complex. And sometimes why I don't like to get caught up in the naming of what's happening, right? Some diagnoses and labeling that for individuals really helps them, because the individual can now make meaning and can capitalize and say, okay, this diagnosis is what I am. And now I feel I can fix it. But other people, it doesn't matter. It's more of, what are you feeling, and how is this impacting the way you're living your life? And is these things helping or hurting you? And what do we need to change to make sure you're living a life of fulfillment? And that's really the approach that I take, because it is really complex in what's going on.
Because I just had an interview with a young lady who she got diagnosed with depression. And that helped her because now she was more aware of what's been going on with it because she had the feelings and she had things going on. But now that she's aware of what it is, it's almost like you know the opponent you're playing against now.
Right.
So you just, oh, we have a basketball game this Saturday. It's like, all right, who are we playing against? Are we playing against SGA? Are we playing against Luca? Are we playing against Steph Curry? Because that changes everything of who we're playing. And so I think the similar thing of, for some people at least, I don't care who we're playing. I'm going to show up and play my game anyway. Some coaches are like, we're training for us. And some coaches are like, no, let's actually know who we're playing against so we can kind of prepare and scheme a little differently. I think that's kind of what you're saying for the mental health aspect of it. Some people are the coach that wants to prepare and knows who they're playing against. And some are like, I don't care. I just need to prepare anyway.
Yep. And everyone's brain functions differently, responds differently. Sometimes I name it something totally different, be like, all right, we're not going to let Bob win today, right? Like, let's just deal with this later. Um, and certain types of learning how your brain works and how your body responds to things is so helpful. And that's the starting point of for individuals to understand, like, hey, how do I think through things? What are my thinking traps? What are my natural responses? How can I utilize my brain for those that have ADHD or anxiety? Like, how can this be a superpower for me, right? How can I utilize the fact that my anxiety makes me have racing thoughts and over prepare and over analyze every situation? Well, how can I use that for a strength now? So I can look at the playbook differently and look at what's happening and then go and respond and feel in control. How can I know that I have these deep pitfalls and some depressive episodes that might show up if I don't take care of myself? And this is where I turn to, instead of having reactive coping strategies, really focus on these preventative coping, like this consistent coping that you do every day. So it's, what are you setting up in your life and your environment that is allowing you to feel good and allowing you to have emotional balance, so you can avoid those pitfalls and don't dive down as deep when you know they might show up.
So how can depression be a superpower then?
Well, we could look at someone who just, that's a really tough question. I don't know if it can be. um, I mean, I think the reality is, we could maybe spin in a way that people have a lot of feelings, and a lot of emotional, empathetic connection. But um, yeah, I don't think depression's really good. I mean, anxiety is a great one to use for a superpower because you have the energy, but depression is just really hard and scary. And I don't know if it actually really can be. The only way that others can identify and have a superpower is how do I help those with an empathetic grace and understanding, knowing that this isn't something I can say, hey, just snap out of it. Just feel happy. Just go do this. Like there takes a lot of empathetic engagement and understanding to connect and work with individuals that are in a deep state of sadness and depression.
I think that's the part that kind of sucks about it because a lot of people aren't the most emotionally intelligent and they don't have the empathy. And so when someone who might not fully understand what's going on and they're dealing with depression and they don't know or they might not have the words to explain everything, and you have those two people coming together, it can cause a bigger issue. So the one who isn't empathetic and doesn't have the emotional intelligence sees or is around a person with depression and you're just wondering what's going on. But I can't communicate what's going on to help you understand or begin to be educated on it. And it just causes like the whole friction of are you sad or are you depressed or
Mhm.
are you just being lazy versus being depressed? And how I don't know, how could you kind of start to break down the friction between those two relation the people in those relationships?
Yeah, and I had a thought that I'm going to come back to about how can depression be a superpower because I got it for you. I got the answer.
Okay.
But yeah, I think asking the individual who is going through um, depression or depressive states or deep sadness, asking them to teach someone that they're working with how to be better and how to fix it is a really hard ask and probably shouldn't be. I would say individuals that have people in their life, whether it's a family member, a teammate, a significant other that you notice goes through his highs and lows or these dips, be curious, spend time understanding and asking questions and learning and be in a less judgmental place and get out of your own way of how you once would do things or how you would and actually just pause and explore like what's happening in my environment, right? What am I not seeing? Can I build some perspective taking skills? um Empathy is a place that people are like, oh, you can't teach it. I do believe we can learn how to have behavioral cues that can teach people to have more empathetic engagement. There's ways to do that, but the individual has to have a desire to want to, right? And so I would first start with, do you actually want to be curious and help? And if not, find somebody who does, right? I do not think it should be on the individual who's in a deep state of struggle to say, here, fix me this way. They can't do that. They should not be expected to do that.
Mhm. Okay, let's circle back to the superpower piece.
Yeah, so it made me think. I was like, man, really, could this be? So it's in a different way, but I think of the individual athletes that have highlighted their journey on mental health, right? And the trend that we saw that really started back in like 2018, 2016, 2018. There's this huge shift in the athletic realm around athletes have mental health and they're humans too. Like, surprise, surprise. But DeMar DeRozan's tweet, I know it was in like 2018, where he had tweeted back before it was X, right? He tweeted like, the depression gets the best of me, right? And it was like a simple state. I don't even know what time it was in the morning when he wrote it, right? But that highlighted, sure, call to action, a flag of awareness. And then he went on a spread where he was able to talk through things and his experience. Kevin Love, panic attack at halftime in the middle of a game, right? And heart palpitations and didn't know what was happening. It was a medical issue. And then reality that he learned a lot about himself. Those two individuals sparking a change and having a platform around mental health and the impact of it and the realness and what it looks like and how it's a continuous battle. It's a continuous struggle that one works through because they have to work through this. Michael Phelps, Simone Biles, we saw Naomi Osaka, all these individual athletes continuously sharing things as time progressed. To me, that is now how a superpower is you don't hide away from your emotions. You don't hide away from the fact that things are hard or difficult. And you don't make it less than, you just make it real. And that to me is a superpower.
Mm. Okay, you can shoot me down on this. Completely fine with that. But what if it could also be you either so I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg thing. So I could be depressed because I'm very empathetic and because of the weight of everything I feel slides to a depression. And or I am depressed and I know what it feels like to deal with this. So that kind of can create the empathy. So now when I see someone else, like it takes one to know one type of thing. So like, hey, are you okay? So that kind of creates that understanding of what someone is or could be dealing with. And so now you have that connection because I feel this way. That heightens my empathy. So now I see you dealing with similar signs or symptoms that I am dealing with or used to deal with. So now we have that connection to where I can help you out now. So
Yeah, I think both things can be true. Someone who's never gone through anxiety at a deep level, chronic level, severe anxiety with a diagnosis or depression, um, does not mean that they cannot help or relate or connect to an individual, right? This is kind of one of those things that says you must be an athlete to work with athletes or you must have been an addict to understand addicts. Like, no, we can actually have a lot of emotional intelligence and understanding and science behind things to help those and connect and relate to those. Um, at the flip side, just because I've been depressed and maybe you've been depressed, it doesn't mean that our depression is the same. It doesn't mean it started
mhm,
because the same way. And it doesn't mean that our stories will be the same or will be solved the same way. And so sometimes we get in our own way because we think our experience will match someone else's and it's more relatable. And that's the pause where you have to say, hey, just because I've definitely gone through it and I've experienced it, that's my experience. Let me pause and listen to their experience first and then find a common ground of when would it be helpful to share your story, because 100% story sharing is very helpful, and especially in underrepresented populations, where we don't talk about feelings and it has been known to do that or hasn't had access or availability. When I see a lot of these players just having these fireside chats, we call them, where you're sitting around and you're just talking. You know, the beautiful thing about podcasts is talking about things that maybe once weren't talked about or normalized, and we make it normal, we make it real. And hearing someone else's story and people that are listening be like, oh my word, you said words that I had no idea how to make that up. And that's totally me. And I can see myself in that. So powerful and so true. But there's a balance behind making it about you versus making it about us and having this we approach. And at what point um, do we have those things come together? And that takes a lot of empathy and understanding as well.
yeah. I think the education piece helps out a lot because like you said, you can have two different people both dealing with depression. And if person A is dealing with seasonal depression and then person B is just dealing with uh, I don't know the right words, but like temporary depression is just like for a moment.
Mhm.
And now person A is trying to force it on them to be like, oh, you must be dealing with this too. And I deal with this, during these seasons, this is what goes on. So I think the education from, wide ranging of what is it and the different types and everything can help out a lot because it kind of humbles us in a good way to where we don't overthink and over Superman ourselves and think, oh, we can save this person or help them out or push them out this space. So I think the best education right now could be like the different types of depression. So like you mentioned earlier, kind of like high functioning depression, seasonal. So what are the different types and how can we kind of separate what each is?
Yeah, I mean that's yeah, I think we have if it's right after a certain loss, right? Like that's a situational depression because caused by catalyst from something, right? That environmental injury, loss, trauma, some sort, um, to prolonged chronic states of depression, right? Where we go into this deep state of feeling for a long time. Burnout is a really common one where burnout then leads into depression and has symptoms of depression. Seasonal affective disorder is one that we look at individuals at different times and seasons that show up. And I like to look at this differently too, where one, it can be weather based, where you're living in the world when you start losing the sunshine and the activity, and you can't do the things that you once did because the environment you're living in. We call that environmental stressors have caused now the response to be depression to show up. But also like anniversaries of things, anniversaries around deaths or trauma or things of those nature can also then cause someone to go into a state of depression at that time and have depressive episodes. And so there are the episodic moments and then the more long-term chronic states of depression that exist. And like we talked about, the genetic component, the environmental factors, they all lead into identity loss. Common times where maybe you're living a great functional life, and everything was fluid and great and you're a high performer, and then you go into retirement and then it's like, well, who am I? And then we go into the state of depression. Another big thing that we talk a lot in the sport world is kind of these Olympic blues, or like these big playoff times where you have this huge momentum build. The whole season's building to this one moment, this championship moment or this Olympic moment. And like that Olympic moment, it lasts like 13 seconds. And then now what? And it's over, whether good or bad. If you had and you won the championship, or you lost and you're super sad in that moment. But then afterwards, that 4 to 6 weeks post that big moment time, individuals will often then go into some depressive symptoms, because now what, their routines have shifted, the things they're working towards have gone. And so we often talk about that bubble too, of like, hey, what's the off ramp during these big catalyst moments? And a lot of the athletes that I work towards, it's much more preparing for that transition post season so that they can still get back in a healthy balance for their routines.
Yeah, I think that's the big one, is just dealing with that plateau. You know, it's like, man, I've reached the pinnacle. I've reached Mount Olympus. I'm here. What's next?
Yeah.
I think the Olympics is the greatest demonstration of that, because you're working, 2 to 4 years for this moment, and it's like, okay, here we go. We're fighting for gold, or some people just want to get placed. Like, man, I don't care if I get bronze. Like, I'm from some third world country. We have nothing. So if I can go home with this, I am on the top of the world. And like you said, no matter what happens, there's still some level of love and respect. So I think that's a crazy one that I don't think gets mentioned enough. I think it was the episode with you. We talked about discipline. How do you kind of stay disciplined and after the wins and success that you have? And it's like, man, you just have to really figure out how to get back in there. So for the depression piece of this, what does that look like? So if you working with an Olympian or somebody who just won state championship, and it's like, okay, we did this. I'm in college. I just went to the Final Four and we just had all the success. What does that next, down ramp look like? How do you kind of gradually get back to the norm, I guess you can say?
Well, hopefully, I've been doing some good work up into that championship moment or that big moment, because I often really encourage, and I call it like the 5 minute mind, but I really encourage individuals to learn how to sit in silence and stillness. Every day, at least for 5 minutes, and building up these coping mechanisms that they learn how to be still. They learn how to slow down. They're being intentional about that in a consistent basis. They're learning things to do outside of their physical sport routine. So whether that's they like to read a book, or they play video games, or they go color, or they're artistic, or they like to walk or bake. These things of doing stuff outside of sport, one, increases who you are as a person and your identity, and you're much more than the sport that you do, right? But then also, what we're building is a lot of safety net habits that once I end this big championship, in this season, in this big moment, and I am required to take time off, and I am in a state of transition before I start getting back to either a training routine for the next season in that off season time, or out of season time, depending on what you call it, or you go into retirement phase, right? Your body still needs to physically rest, because you've just done this huge training cycle. And so we work in habits of, hey, your body's physically resting. Emotionally, you have to rest and get in different spaces. But what are you doing in your life that can still allow you to bring joy and have purpose and feel connected, right? And so this is little cues that hopefully they've learned throughout their season, so it doesn't feel like such a dip anymore. That they can journal, that they can, if they're faithful, they read the devotions, they find social support groups, they have dinners, they get into their new habits or routines of playing music, or things that they maybe couldn't spend that much time on during season, but now have time to add that and incorporate that back into a more meaningful time in this off season.
How much does identity play a role in this? Because I feel like that's a huge piece in anxiety and in this. So when your identity is rooted into being the champion, or winning the gold, or being a basketball player, and then they get stripped away from you from injury or retirement or whatever it is, how much does that play a role with all of this going on? Because I feel like that's a huge piece.
Oh, all of it, right? I mean, as humans, starting at the age of 5, we have like social comparison that starts coming into our brain where we're comparing ourselves to other people that we are alike and are not alike. And are we good enough or not good enough? And we all have this not enough button that can get pushed at different phases of what we're doing. And any person will fall in this continuum of either striving for success or they are looking at not to fail, right? Because fear of failure and fear of evaluation are two components that impact who we are, how we're feeling, if we're good enough. And that can lead into anxiety and depression very easily. And so I think every individual needs to first, like we talked about, have that self awareness, but then start building a secure sense of self and really start liking themselves. And knowing who they are first. And that will allow them to start living the life they want to have and feel passionate and have fulfillment and learn how to get out of these mind traps that exist and get back into an emotional balance.
I'm starting to think identity is almost everything.
Yeah.
Because when I don't know, just me personally, when I see posts or I watch videos on YouTube, whatever it is, you kind of pull the layers back and it kind of goes back to some level of identity of
Mhm.
how you see yourself. So like, do you see yourself as the victor or the victim? Do you see yourself as a basketball player and nothing else? Or is your whole world and your identity framed around being an athlete, being a basketball player? Or kind of just how you see yourself as your role in a friend group? Like, are you the mother of the friend group? Are you the supporter? Are you the funny one? And it's like, so something comes in and attacks that identity, it almost shatters everything we have. So I'm starting to think like identity is like a pillar of our mental health. Am I
All of your
far
mental
from it?
health, who you are, your self-worth, your self-awareness. Yeah, 100%. Like when the self is attacked, then we start to have emotional breakdown.
Mm, that's gonna be another episode. So let's put a pin in that one. We have to circle back. So, um, how do you manage depression? Because I think that's a beast because, like you said, it's so many different ranges of it, so many different types of it. So, what is the management of it? Is that the right word? Like managing it? Because I've been thinking about that, preparing for like, how do you kind of
Yeah.
manage
Yeah, I
basically?
think that's great, right? Managing because we're trying to get back to an emotional balance. I mean, each individual will function differently, right? There are what we call treatment approaches that can really help the individuals. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a great solution that we can work through where you're looking and focusing on how one is thinking and then how one can go and change some behaviors to get out of a certain rut and start performing differently or living life that can fuel them differently. But with depression, it can be really tricky. And I take a holistic approach first, right? I try to do a lot of things in their life that will naturally regulate their mental and emotional state, like meditation and walking and exercise that can produce a lot of these natural neurotransmitters, healthy routines and habits, along pairing that with the self awareness of when do they have reflective journal time, when do they come in and talk through their feelings and emotions and make meaning of them. And have goals and small progression plans to see success and get that reward. But sometimes that's not enough, right? And especially sometimes like they're doing all the things and they're checking all the boxes and they just really are helpless and have no hope and have no meaning and they start to isolate more and more and the social support and all the things aren't working. Sometimes you might need to then do a medication referral. You might need to talk to somebody, a psychiatrist to help you work through and say, hey, these are the things that are going on. These are the things that I've been trying. And sometimes that medication management can assist. And you still then sh- should continue the work you're doing with a therapist because medication is just helping one solution, right? And it's not working through the core aspects that we need to work through. And so pairing them together is very beneficial. And it's personalized for the individual and it's an approach that needs to be thought through for a whole treatment care plan around how can I best support this person. And that's why I said because any mental health um, problem or concern is very individualized and no two things are the same. No two humans are the same. It's the presentation of these symptomology is going to be very different as well. And so while we know the theoretical framework to treat them and help work through that, we have to take that personalized approach and understand what's the story the person I'm working with is writing and how can we get them back to have that really positive chapter ending that they want to have and feel very successful in what they're working through. And so I can never, if I'm working with you, say, hey, our goal is to help you feel ecstatic and happy and this joy in life if you actually are like good with just feeling content. Great.
Yeah.
Let's get you to feel content, right? Let's work through that. And so it really is a collaborative approach, and it's a slow approach, and it's knowing that you might make some progress and come back and have this awareness of how do I work through these traps and navigate together. But the social support and the social systems are very essential to have more than just one person working through it. It should be a team approach.
So there's thousands, I'm just throwing it out right there, of different types of therapy
Yeah.
people can have. But in prepping for it, I kind of boiled down to like CBT and somatic being like two of the better ones that people can go through for depression.
Mhm.
Is that accurate? Or, and if it is, like, is there more to it or less? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at that, right, those are very common effective treatment approaches. The somatic works through the body and what's going on with the body approach. A lot of therapists now too will kind of be more generalized and use different modalities for treatment for the individual to work through. Cognitive behavioral therapy is very effective, right? Mindfulness based therapeutic approaches, ACT, acceptance commitment therapy is another really great approach as well to allow individuals to work through this process. And I think each individual, when we look at therapeutic success, 85% relies on the relationship with the provider and the person, right? Not just the modality they're using, but it comes back to the relationship. You have to trust me that I'm here for you, and that we have that relationship and understanding and ability to connect and do what's best for you, right? And so when we look at why are people successful in therapy is they had a really great trusting relationship with the person they were working with.
But I feel like it has to be some level of both. Because I
Oh,
think, okay,
you have to be grounded in science and theoretical framework to treat somebody, yes. You can't just
no.
like me as a human, but.
So, okay, what I'm saying is, let's say 60% of it is the relationship that the the people have. I think the last 40% could be the fine-tuned details of what this person specifically needs. And so if I am very I'm in my head a lot and I'm very practical in how I think. You can do all this body, like feel my body and see what's going on inside of it, but like maybe CBT fits me better because I need to
Mhm,
think through what I'm going through, change my actions and behaviors to change how my mindset's thinking about this.
mhm.
And so that's why I think it's like 60% relationship and you got to have that. But then the last 40% is fine tuning the right path for this person to go down. So we can be best friends, but that doesn't mean your style of treatment can be good for me. So I'm not saying is we're best friends and that makes me be your therapist. Like, no, I still need you to know what you're talking about, what you're doing.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
the
And
the
I
last piece would be the type of what you're going through.
and I would say, yeah, like it's hard to put percentages on all of these things, right? But
Yeah.
cognitive behavioral therapy may not work for everyone. It's a wildly effective treatment approach, sound grounded in science and theory. ACT, acceptance commitment therapy is another one grounded in science. Interpersonal therapy is another one, but you might not love CBT and you might like me, but you don't love CBT. And the things that I'm trying to tell you to do are just not working and it feels prescribed. And it's like, I don't want to do that. So now you're going to go work with someone who's much more act in that process. And you like that, right? And those interventions are working better for you. And so I think therapy isn't just about fixing someone or solving the problem. It's helping people understand how they think and feel, and then now giving them tools that they can work through things on their own. And so part of the work is the individual themselves has to be in a place to utilize the tools and access the support and the communication to then fix it in their own life, right? And work through stuff in their own life.
Mhm. All right. So I like this the last time we did it. So I'm gonna circle back and do it again.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna do two of them. Okay. So the green, yellow, and red.
Okay.
All right. So the first one is if I have a friend and I think they might have depression. We're dealing with depression.
Mhm.
Green, nah, they're good. You're just tripping. Yellow is like, maybe. It's like you should probably ask and just, just keep an eye on to see. Red is like, okay, definitely go ask them, get some help for them so we can kind of make sure things are okay. How do we kind of separate in those three buckets just as best as you can?
I mean, if you're worried about a friend, because maybe they snapped at you or they were irritable or maybe they just had low energy. I think pay attention and check, is this a consistent pattern? Was this a one day thing or a one moment thing, or did this happen more than one day, right? If it's like a one day thing, okay, they're green. They just had a moment. They were just moody or whatever, right? The yellow can be like, hey, I noticed they're showing up late to places. They're not responding as fast as they used to on text messages. They're declining some invites here or there. They're not as talkative or engaged in stuff that we would do. And they're just kind of like finding excuses. Okay, I need to check on them, right? Something's going on. The red is, okay, maybe there's someone who used to have a lot of style and they're coming in and it's like they don't even care what they look like. Their hair's not done. They're not taking care of themselves. They don't have their nails done, right? They just look a little unkempt, right? And look, like you can have a leisure and wear sweatpants and look real cool, but we're saying like they just really, their style is very different. Maybe you notice some changes in their weight, they're losing weight or they're eating more, and you just notice things that are different. Maybe they're doing things like they're going out way more than they used to. So this is kind of the myth, right? You think that you're just staying at home and you're refusing these social invites, but maybe you've noticed that they're going out way more and they're dating a lot more people and are just doing some erratic behaviors that maybe they didn't do before. These are things that you need to check in on as well. Maybe they get speeding tickets and you're like, hey, like what is happening? This does not seem like that, right? Or they just stop responding, stop hanging out, withdraw completely. You haven't heard from them in a while. And we now know we should probably go check in on them as well.
Mm. So let's say I'm leaning towards they do have depression, or I found out they do have depression. Green are things that you absolutely should do to help and support them. Yellow is like, it's kind of tricky, got to know the person to do it. Red is like, please don't do this. Stay away from it. Don't ask this at all.
Yeah, I mean, green is like first just showing up and saying, like, hey, can I come over? Like, are you all right? Even acknowledging, hey, I noticed that you've been late a couple times. You're not going out as much. Like, I'm worried about you. Am I reading this the right way? Like, share your feelings. Like, hey, I've noticed these things, and I'm worried about you. Can you help me understand what's going on? What do you need from me? How can I help you? Right. And if you want a softer approach, just like have a fun little like goodie basket that you like that guys always do together. Bring over food, hang out, show up, and see how they respond to that. Right. Um, Yellow is being more judgy and being like, hey, like, why are you late? And what were you doing? You've missed these things. You're not hanging out with us. You act like you don't care. And you're kind of more in this blaming, shaming phase of what their behaviors are doing versus pausing and understanding something might be going on, being like, hey, dude, like, you just don't care about us. You're not responding to the group text. Like, it's not going to help
Right.
them, or
Mhm.
why'd you miss the thing that we did? And like, talk about how great the night was. Like, that won't help them either. Um, so the shaming, blaming phase, you know, is a pretty poor response. Like, first, just check for understanding. That's step one. The red is kind of being like, oh, depression's just sadness, or can't you just snap out of it? Or, why aren't we just motivated? We're doing this thing. And people can't just snap out of it. They can't just get better. They can't just start doing stuff and feel better. Or it's like, hey, but you've been showing up, you've been performing really well. Like, you're doing all this stuff. Like, your life looks so great. Like, just get over it. What do you have to be sad for? Like, let's not do that either.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads into like the high functioning depression piece because you seem to be so well, or you're at the job doing fine, you're at school and you're at practice and you're showing up just fine. But outside of practice, we never hear from you. You never respond to the group text. We want to go out this weekend or after the game, and you're never doing it. So I think that's kind of a, a weird one to kind of navigate with from the outside looking in because you can't fully tell in that case.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I feel like high functioning depression is a real tricky one because it's just like you seem to be doing so well, but it's like you're not. I don't know.
And it's really hard for high performers that are in these high functioning spaces and doing well in those moments because they have not been given permission to be vulnerable and to ask for help and to show a softer side. I don't like to call it a weakness side. They haven't been able to show a softer side of like things are really hard and this is difficult. Like whether the environment hasn't taught them that it's a safe space to do that because
Mhm.
it's about wins and losses in sports and be tough and all the things. But these individuals also carry the weight of like, I am a performer. I'm expected to do this. And naturally they want to do this, right? They're fighting their own brain. They want to perform and succeed and have a passion and joy for it. But there's a disconnect because they don't feel that, right? And so I
Mm.
think that um it is very hard to accept that someone can be sad and also be successful at the same time.
I think that's just the hardest because in sports, like you said, is the identity of being a high performer. It's the I can show up and drop DeMar DeRozan, Kevin Love, like you guys are performing so well. We just saw you in the playoffs and you did so great. You just had a career, a series or a career night, whatever it was. You hit the game winner. So how are you dealing with the pressure? Or you're making so much money. So how are you dealing with the pressure?
You're not allowed to be sad. You're not allowed
Yeah.
to be not okay. And this is where I get so upset with it's okay to not be okay because we can say that word, we can say that phrase, and I'm like, really though? In what environment have we allowed it to be okay to not be okay? And so, true environments, if you can really allow that to happen, that looks very different. I think the phrase is great intent, but the impact is still not there at the level we need it to be.
There's so many sayings like that that I just end up thinking about like, nah, that's not true. I don't agree with that one. So
That one really gets me. And I'm at fault. Like I've retweeted it, I've shared it, I've done the things because it's like, the phrase most important and connected to mental health. It's okay to not be okay. I'm like, in what world are you living in right now that that's still true?
yeah. I try not to share too many of them because I get it's good intentions, and I think that people need to hear that message overall. And so I try not to like be that one guy who's like, "Well, that's a terrible advice." It's like, no, some people need to hear that, so I just shut up and keep it to myself. And
You're right. Because again, the intent is very good. The impact is not always hitting the way we need to. And that's based on situations and environments. So 100%. Do I wish it would be true? Yes. I wish it was true that we can have moments where it really is okay to struggle, right? And it's realizing that the same thing can be true that we can push through the hard, right? I'm not expecting rainbows, butterflies, amazing easiness every day, right? Things will be hard, and so it's kind of this balance of acceptance. Is what we get back to from the very beginning. It's like, hey, we can accept that things can be hard. We can accept things can be great. We can work through this continuum and we can push through and realize like no matter what, we got to show up our best self, our most authentic self, and trying to be as secure as we can so we can complete the goals that we want to have.
man, I think this was a beautiful piece of just education and just getting better understanding for anyone who's dealing with it, who knows someone that's dealing with it, or you just hear about it, but you never fully know. Somebody could be entering into or about to be entering someone who's dealing with it. So, for anyone who could be dealing with it, what is like the key thing you want them to understand outside of it's okay to not be okay? Let's remove that one. But
Yeah.
what else would you want them to know and understand about this?
I think just give yourself some grace and know that, yeah, this moment in time that you're dealing with is pretty hard. And you're allowed to be tired and you're allowed to be sad and you're allowed to be curious about how you're feeling. And ultimately, know that there's always somebody who's going to be able to have support for you and guide you in a way that can give you tools to work through the situation. Right. And so the first step is give yourself grace and permission to feel what you're feeling and then also have the time and awareness to say, hey, I can get out of this. And I might not be able to do it by myself. And if I'm not able to do it by myself, let me go find people in my life that can help me.
Mm. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
No, I'm look, I think it's a heavy topic. It's a scary topic for people to talk through because as we said, there's so many different presentations, different states of it, the reason why the impact, and I know we haven't gotten into it, but the impact of depression can also not have a great ending, right? There can be some really sad things that cause of this, whether it's addiction to self-harm to suicidality. And those are all very real things that are so hard for some individuals to understand to connect with and are scared people are scared to handle these deep emotions, but I think the first step for this is like let me just pause and be curious. Let me have the understanding that this can exist in so many ways and I don't have to have all the answers, but I can do a really good job just empathetically engaging and understanding.
Mm. Once again, you've created another masterclass of this.
Yeah.
Uh, this is why I keep having. I think it's like my fourth, fifth time having you
I
on.
love it.
You're just now a staple, repeat guest now. You just have to keep coming back. So
Let's do it. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you guys.
I appreciate you too. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching and listening. See you next episode.